Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jax Miller. Now, in a recent All Angles special, Giovanni Dennis looked at the problem of noise pollution in Jamaica and how it's affecting our hearing. Yes, people are going deaf from noise. So we have a follow-up discussion on that coming up this evening. A little bit later on in the program, what can we do about this problem? First, though, Prime Minister Andrew Holness earlier today announced that there will be a by-election for the constituency of St. Ann Northeast that will be on September 30. This was after former Member of Parliament Marcia Smith resigned suddenly yesterday. The opposition People's National Party says they're not contesting the by-election. TVJ's Andrea Chisholm spoke with PNP General Secretary Dr. Dayton Campbell.
First of all, Dr. Campbell, will the PNP be contesting the by-election in Northeast St. Ann?
No, we will not be. The People's National Party will be contesting the by-elections in the two divisions that are vacant, so in the Morant Bay division and the Anion Town division. The reason being is that those divisions became vacant because of natural causes, persons died, and the local government election is not due until 2028. So we are 3.5 years away from a local government election. So we will be contesting those two by-elections. In relation to the constituencies, we think that the government is trying to use the state resources to play politics and to deal with their internal politics. If you look at the constitution regarding local government election, we are not allowed to have a by-election within the last year. Leading up to the general local government election. Even in the People's National Party, we have said that we have no elections within the year before a general election. And it should be the same thing in the government. What they are seeking to do is to use the state resources and to have a serial by-elections to generate some energy in their party. And we're not participating in the wasting of the state resources. It's going to take approximately $25 million for them to host a by-election. And this is in the context of schools still being unrepaired. We have only 18% of our students getting 5 subjects to include math and English. We have the agricultural sector that is in a state of crisis with food prices escalating sharply. We have a health sector that is underperforming with patients sitting on floors and sleeping on the bed. And in that context, we think that there is so much more that the government can do with the limited resources that are available. We are already in the final year. The government is unlikely to call an election in the summer period, so we are really maximum 8-9 months away from an election. The government is very unpopular. We think the thing that should be done is that they should call the general election and let the people decide if they want to continue along this downward spiral that is leading to disaster, if they want change and hope.
What signal do you think this will send to the electorate, though? You're a major political party. A by-election is called and you're sitting this one out. This is not like 1983.
No, this is saying to our persons that we're getting ready. After I finish speaking with you, I'm going into a campaign committee meeting. We are busy preparing for a general election, which is due. We are of the opinion that when the report comes out on the Prime Minister, that will put further pressure on him. When his Integrity Commission report comes out, when the report comes out on the illicit aid, will put further pressure on the government. I've already listed some of the things that has the government under pressure and seen as underperforming. And so we think that a general election really should be what the Prime Minister calls, if he calls anything. Let us be mindful of something, that the vacancy in Northeast St. Ann was engineered. It is a doing of the Jamaica Labour Party. There's a vacancy that has been there in South Trelawney for over a year. You orchestrate a vacancy in Northeast and call the by-election the next day while still not calling the by-election in South Trelawney, which has been without representation for over a year. That's politics. We're not going to be parties to that. Complicit in the government wasting the resources of the state and using the state to settle their internal politics.
What would this mean for your candidate, Dr. Ryan Simpson? He has been working in the area. Now you're not calling a by-election. Matthew Samuda will be there drumming up support. Wouldn't it hurt the party's chances when the general election is called?
No, that's not how we are approaching it. Our thing is evidence-based, data-driven. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we set appropriate targets for the different constituencies, and then that we find the bodies to match those targets. So we will continue to do the work in Northeast Centre and in the other constituencies in the country to ensure that we can engage the people, we can explain to them what it is that we're about, show them what the government is doing that is wrong and how it can be done differently. Because this government has a penchant for trying to deceive the people into thinking that what they're doing that is failing is the only way it can be done. But things can certainly be done another way. Let me use agriculture as an example. The food prices are soaring out of control, and the Minister of Agriculture makes it appear as if there's nothing that can be done. Majority of the items now that are selling at the increased costs are cash crops. These are things that the crop maturity for them is 3 months. And the ministry and the minister put back some assistance in the hands of the farmers, especially in the areas that were not affected by the hurricane. We would have been able to have persons producing cabbage, tomato, sweet peppers, and those things now. Additionally, the ministry given out the permits for importation earlier, and every previous government, not just PNP but also JP government, knows that after a disaster you remove the importation duties. So a pound of tomato in the US in the supermarket, not at the farm gate, in the supermarket, it's like 98 cents, which is about $150 Jamaican. But when it gets to Jamaica, it's selling for $1,000, because my research shows that it's passing through too many hands before it gets to the final distributor, the supermarkets. And so this rapacious capitalism that is in the society, it needs to be treated by having a government that has the interests of the people at heart, that would put something in place to ensure that we protect the consumers. And the Ministry of Agriculture has to work with the Ministry of Investment and Commerce and the Consumer Affairs Commission to ensure that we don't have persons that are taking advantage of our people in a time that they can't feed themselves. It cannot be that a minimum wage earner that is earning $15,000 per week is being called upon to pay $1,000 for a pound of tomato. And then when they can't eat properly and they just eat pure starch and those other things, and they get non-communicable diseases like hypertension and diabetes and the circulatory problems, they become a burden on the hospital, the secondary healthcare sector. And then we have people in the hospitals on floor and on chairs. And so it just becomes a bad sequelae for those who are from the lower parts of the society. So we need a caring government. It's time for Mark Golding to assume the reins of government supported by an able team.
Is the PNP sitting out the by-election because you have no money to campaign at this time?
Money is not a problem. We are not complaining about money. We are strategically doing what we're doing. There are persons in the society that have bought into what we are about. We have a lead in the polls. Persons are willing to support our efforts. So that is not a consideration to say that we have no money. That is not the consideration. There's a moral issue at play, right? There's a principled issue. There's a poor governance in Jamaica in general. The government cannot orchestrate a vacancy in a constituency and then call that by-election the next day whilst ignoring a vacancy that exists for over a year in another constituency. That should be frowned on by all well-thinking Jamaicans.
You mentioned the divisions already, but say for instance, because the Prime Minister said in the coming months he will call the other by-elections. We'll see how that plays out. What if a by-election is announced in Trelawney, and if and when Dr. Clark resigns, there's a by-election in that constituency as well. Will you contest those two?
So that's what I'm saying. We're contesting the by-elections in the divisions, and the principle behind it is that the local government election is not due until 2028, and that's why we're contesting that. But the by-elections in the constituencies, we're not contesting those because the general election is due within 12 months. And the same thinking that informed both major political parties in the parliament to have put the provision in the constitution that there is no by-election within the last year of the general local government election being due is the same principle that should obtain for the general election. It is a waste to have $25 million per by-election. The Prime Minister didn't even come today to announce all 3 by-elections at once. What he's trying to do is to do them serially, to try and develop some momentum and try to assist his failing numbers in the polls and those things. So he's trying to get some momentum out of this whilst wasting the resources of the state. How do you look on a teacher and look at the parents and say to them that your child can't start school, they have to be in a church hall because the roof of the school isn't repaired, but we can find $25 million to call a by-election that was orchestrated by the Labour Party?
Another thing, it sort of seemed, well, let me get back on track. Right. Your party workers in Northeast St. Ann, how have they reacted to this decision? That's if they're told.
Our party workers in Northeast Central and in the other 62 constituencies, along with a host of Jamaicans, are saying that this entire government needs to go. And so they want the general election. I've been saying it before that what we have currently is government ministers who are auditioning for jobs elsewhere. Kamina Johnson-Smith was trying to become Secretary General, was it? A Commonwealth a few years ago. Minister Clark is leaving. The same man that said that he was increasing the salary so that people would not migrate, so he can retain and attract the brightest, but apparently he didn't increase by enough to retain himself. We have teachers and nurses and other persons who we are calling upon them to stay in Jamaica whilst we have government ministers auditioning for jobs elsewhere. I want to sign a recommendation for the Prime Minister for some international job because his time is up.
Is it safe to say the PNP was caught off guard by this latest announcement?
Not at all. As I said, we are in full election mode. We're preparing for a general election. So if we're in the phase of preparing for a general election, calling a by-election could not be something that catches us off guard. There's a principled matter here, as you cannot orchestrate a vacancy and then ignore a vacancy that existed before for 1 year and then go and call the one. I don't think that has ever happened in the country before, where somebody resigns one day and by the next day you have an announcement. We didn't have a resignation of Mike Henry, Carl Samuda, J.C. Hutchinson, all of these alien politicians that are in the departure lounge. What we had was a young female that they used and discarded. She's within year 4 of her first term, and she was pushed out to facilitate the machinations of the Prime Minister. We're not going to be party to that.
One other quick question. How can Jamaicans take the PNP seriously at this time with you sitting out a by-election at a time like this?
They're taking us serious because we're not participating in a process to waste the state resources to contest an election that was orchestrated by the government whilst ignoring a vacancy that exists for over 1 year. Jamaicans must take the PNP serious. I would ask the question, how can they take this government serious that would ignore a vacancy that has been there for 1 year, orchestrate one, and then call it the next day, whilst at the same time going to the parliament to change the constitution to put off the by-election in St. Thomas where a councillor died? A natural cause created that vacancy, and they have gone to the parliament to change the law to put that off. But they've gone there to call a by-election the day after they orchestrated the resignation of a young female that they have not supported and guided in the process to ensure that she could have a successful career.
Thanks so much to Andrea Chisholm. Stay tuned. When we come back after the break, we hear from the General Secretary of the Jamaica Labour Party, Dr. Horace Chang. Stay tuned.